In this session, let's talk about how to create ECS cluster on private subnets. Last time we have created a VPC network with public subnets and private subnets. On that VPC right now, I want to use private subnets to launch ECS cluster. For that, I'm using OHA region where I spinned up my VPC network. On the same region, I want to spin up ECS cluster. Search for ECS, Elastic Container Service. We can see the dashboard is getting loaded. I don't have any cluster as of now under this OHA region. Select Create Cluster. Let me give some name like Dev Cluster Demo. What about namespace? Cluster name is fine. The cluster what I'm trying to create, I'm trying to specify some name. Then what about namespace? Why we have to create it? Namespace is like a logical group of your services that make your application. What does it mean? For example, I have multiple ECS clusters. I want to create them under one namespace so that the services which are running across the cluster can talk to each other with the help of this namespace. If you are planning for that, you can give a proper name. But by default, the cluster name itself will be added as a namespace. This is all about cluster configuration. Now let us see infra. In this particular capacity category, I want to select AWS Fargate, which is a serverless architecture, and also I want to use AWS EC2 instances as a compute. Now, in order to create these EC2 instances, it is trying to use auto scaling group. It's going to create a new auto scaling group. Either it will try to launch EC2 instance on demand or spot. Whichever is needed as per the requirement, we have to pick. For now, I'm using on demand with the image as Amazon Linux. What are the other options we have? We can pick either Amazon Linux, Bottle Rocket, or Windows Server. If you want to utilize a compute as a Windows servers to launch your containers, then we can go for Windows. Choice is ours. After that, EC2 instance type. For now, it has selected automatically T2 micro under free tier eligible. But let me try to give from T2 series with 2 core CPU minimum and 4 GB RAM, which comes under T2 medium. What does it mean? Every instance it is going to launch will get created with the capacity of 2 core CPU, 4 GB RAM each. And then we have to select an instance role. In the previous session, we have seen how to create an instance role with the name ECS instance role that has been selected. And now we have to provide desired capacity. How many instances you want to launch straight away with a minimum capacity? I just want to specify 3 since I want to create 3 instances in 3 different availability zones. For a practice purpose, you can spin up only 1. That is sufficient. Maximum, I want to give 5. Now these values depends upon number of computes that you want to launch as part of EC2. Based on that, we have to take a decision. Since it is our testing environment, I have used minimum 3, maximum 5. And it will get scaled among these particular values. After that, if you want to log into these instances, we have to select a key pair. If we don't have a key pair under this OHA region, we have to select this option in order to create a new pair. Or else, if you already have a key pair, select from the drop-down list. In my case, you can see I have a key called OHA_Sudams. Let me select that. After that, what about root volume? Every instance it is going to launch under this particular capacity type. All the instances will have a root volume with a common size, whatever I pass here. Minimum capacity has to be 30 GB. Maximum we can provide 16 terabyte. For now, 30 GB is more than enough for the EC2 instances. I'll leave this option as a default value. And right now we are not using anywhere. If I need to use it, first we have to use AWS Outpost, and then after that we can use ECS anywhere. Since we have not configured that, we can't use that functionality. Now, as per the infra, we have selected AWS Fargate and AWS EC2 instances. With this, your infra task is done. What is the next one? Networking. For the EC2 instances, what you are going to launch? What is the subnets that you have to select from the VPC? That we have to decide from here. I don't want to use a default VPC. Instead of that, I want to use a VPC what we have created in the previous session. And one more important point is I want to launch my cluster on a private subnets. That is the reason why I have to deselect the public subnets which are available here. How we can identify the public subnets? You can see the tag which is added by AWS. How it has added? Because your subnets have been attached to a route table which is having internet gateway. For that subnets it will show you the tag as public. Or else you have already provided a name, public subnet 2A, public subnet 2C, public subnet 2B. Even by using that names we can identify and then we can deselect them. Simple. Select the into mark. It will get deselected. That's all. Now it is going to spin up your cluster only on this particular private subnets. After that, we have to specify the security group. I don't want to use a default security group. I want to create a new one with the name ECS cluster security group. Here let me give a description. Allow traffic on ECS cluster nodes. I want to allow only one particular port, it is 22, which comes under SSH protocol. And I don't want to allow the communication from any other network. It has to allow the communication only from within the VPC network. Then what I have to prefer here? The CIDR has to be 10.100.0.0/16 according to the VPC CIDR. After that, what about AutoSN public IP? For the instances what you are going to launch, I don't want to assign public IP addresses. Anyway, it will not get assigned. Why? Because here these are private subnets. It doesn't mean that we can't allocate public IP address. It all depends upon the settings that we have enabled on the subnets of the VPC, which we have not discussed in the previous session. What is it? Let us understand. Here what I've selected, use subnet settings to decide whether to assign auto public IP address or not. It all depends upon the subnet settings. What does it mean? Let us go back to the VPC dashboard. In another tab, let me search for VPC and select the dashboard. Now we can see the VPC dashboard. Under that, subnets. Let me try to filter the subnets which belongs to ECS. Let me add a filter based on this VPC. So these are the subnets which belongs to the VPC what we have created for our ECS cluster. Now forget about private subnets. On the public subnets we have to enable AutoSN public IP, because later in the upcoming sessions I'm going to launch or I'm going to integrate Elastic Load Balancer of AWS. At the time you will be creating an internet facing load balancer and I'll be trying to use public subnets. Now for that particular subnet, it has to enable with AutoSN public IP in the subnet level. How we can enable that? Select the subnet, go to actions. In the drop down list we can see edit subnet settings. And you can see AutoSN IP settings. Under that we have to enable public IPv4 address auto-assign and then save the changes. These are called as subnet settings for AutoSN public IP. Only for public subnets I will do this particular task. Same procedure. We are done with 2C. Now finally 2B. Enable. Why I'm not trying to perform this particular task on private? Because for private I don't want to assign public IP. Here That's what we have selected. Auto assign public IP address to the instances will be decided based on the subnet settings. Even though if you have enabled in the subnet settings, I don't want to turn it on. I want to permanently disable for this EC2 instances on the ECS cluster. Then we have to select turn off. It will never enable public IP address on this particular subnets. You can pick any one of them, but I'm using use subnet settings. Tomorrow I might have a requirement where if it is enabled on the subnet, instance should get a public IP. If it is not enabled in the subnet, it should not get a public IP. That's the reason why I'm using use subnet settings. Then the next important option is monitoring. Though it is optional, if you want to monitor the metrics of your cluster, then we have to enable container insights like CPU, memory, disk, and network. That's the reason we have enabled. And then I don't want to enable any encryption right now, though it is optional. For now, I'm skipping this particular functionality. We can enable encryption for managed storage or forget ephemeral storage. Finally, tags. If you want, you can assign some custom tags. Let us say I want to give environment as development as a metadata. If you want, you can add more tags. It is up to you based on your requirement. For now, I have assigned only one tag under this particular ECS. Once you are done with all the parameters that you need to create a cluster, we can select create cluster. Now your request will go to the CloudFormation template and then it will start creating the cluster, which is in progress right now. Now we can see the cluster has been spinned up successfully. If I select the cluster, you can see the info. As of now, we don't have any services and tasks that have been created. And if you want to see the infra related information, select the tab called infra. And here we can see Fargate, Fargate spot, and then we have the infra what we have selected, nothing but EC2. And these are the 3 EC2 instances that have been spinned up as part of the capacity EC2. And every instance has been created with 2 core CPU and 4 GB RAM. And the agent was running with the version 1.87.0 on all the 3 computes. With this, we can confirm our cluster has been created successfully. That's all for this particular session. Thank you.